Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to the round 14 preview episode of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast / videocast. This episode is brought to you by My Captain Vela, a new fantasy documentary by Bobby Warshaw for the 2019 fans. Oh, wait, no, that's not right. Actually brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing subreddit community of r/fantasy MLS. I'm your host, Reid Conley from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I am joined by regular co-host Michael Denton. Blaine Riffle cannot be with us because he is celebrating his daughter Lily's second birthday, so a big happy birthday out to Lily, and also a happy birthday out to Patreon donor Jessup Gage, who was on the show a few weeks ago, whose daughter also shares a birthday with Lily, and she is 1 today. So happy double birthdays out there to you guys. I am excited, though, to welcome our guest for tonight, Sounders beat reporter for MLSfemale.com. We shaking her hands triumphantly right there, Ashley Savage. How are you doing tonight?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me back.
Yes, thank you. You were tearing it up with your overall standing and in your leagues before, and I got some good insights about the banter between you and your husband. So we're excited to have you back to let us know how you're still doing and how that's all turned out. So welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Yeah,
happy Memorial Day.
Yes, happy Memorial Day.
It was a fun weekend of soccer. I mean, for me, the highlight was Atlanta fans having obviously not ever watched Unimas before, or at least the SAP function, and not realizing that he always does, it's not a goal, it's a golazo! And then all their hearts breaking because they thought it was going to get barred.
Yep.
Oh, this is great times.
That is fun. But you're right, it is Memorial Day, so we'll take a quick moment right here to say thank you to all of those and give honor to all those who have served and have died in the past in honor for the United States and Canada and any of the other countries. I think it's fair that as a multinational league we represent and respect all of those. So thank you so much to those families of those loved ones who were lost and for their sacrifice and their service. Okay. That needed to be done. I think it was good. But thank you everyone for listening. Thank you everybody for being here. Ashley, I teased it really quick. Give us an update. You had sent me a message about some of the interesting picks your husband was planning on making this week. How'd that turn out for him?
Not great. My husband is MLS Fantasy Original player, and the game has kind of changed to his disadvantage. He's just slid and slid further and further, but he still loves playing. So his whole strategy this season is just throwing it to the wall and seeing what sticks, which is fun because sometimes he gets it really right, like really right. But he's also just gives good feedback because he thinks of things out of the box that they get too scared to pick sometimes. You know what I mean? Like not having Carlos Vela on your team seems crazy, but sometimes he picks someone not better. That's not ever going to happen. But he dropped some with Cincinnati defense, which again, bold, but I mean, I liked it. And I think he captained. Who did he captain? I think he captained Tarek, which I think you did too, Mike. Which turned out not bad. But
no, not bad at all. I mean, Vela got 18, Tarek got 14, so that's pretty close.
I still beat him, so that's what matters.
That is at the end of it. Well, let's just keep talking about round 13 in our preview right here. How did you all do overall, Ashley? Your team.
So I'm trying to go back to 5. I think I ended with 113, which was not bad. I made one crucial mistake, which was I was going back and forth between Kim Ki-hee and Leardom going into that game. And if you can tell by the fact that I said made one big mistake, it was I went with Kim Ki-hee.
Yeah.
And Leardom had a goal and an assist and all that. So that was my bad. But everything else panned out pretty well. I captained Vela because you should. I put Robles on my bench for a keeper who worked out. Kind of was waiting until the very last minutes of that game to see if he'd pull out that shutout and just went with it. I also had Brian White on my bench with 13, which worked out really well for me. I wish I'd played him instead of my other forward, which was Heber, which I know you had talked about last episode. I just had a weird feeling about NYCFC that paid out for me with Maxi Morales, but did not pan out for me with Hey Bear. But overall, and also Nani with that PK miss. But 113 on the week, and I won in my head-to-head, so it turned out okay.
Yeah, I know. I talked about A-Bear as well on Sirius XM with Jason Davis this week, and he did not pay off. But Mike, do you want to talk about that and then go into your team?
I mean, he hit the crossbar. I think he had one other chance that was pretty good. So, I mean, fantasy-wise, I still think he's a decent bet, but, he's not going to score every week, inches away from scoring this week.
Right.
But, I mean, still good value pick. And I mean, what I did with him this week is worked out great. I just had him on the bench.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't hit, let the subs go in. And that worked for me because I put Kaku on my bench. Wasn't sure if he was going to get rotated. He did get rotated against Cincinnati, but still came on and scored. So he got 14 points. So he came in. I did captain Tarek, which wasn't as good as a Vela captain, but I can't really get too mad about a 14-point captain pick. For me, the downsides were Nani, like Ashley said. And then I also had Memo Rodriguez. I was surprised Houston didn't do anything against Minnesota. But then they didn't have Elise this week, which I didn't realize. I think the big thing I didn't realize this week was that Piette for Montreal was out. I still haven't been able to find out what exactly is going on with him, but he was out, and if I'd have known that, I'd have captained Vela too. But yeah, I mean, I got 116 overall. I played Andrew Wiebe in our head-to-head, so I think I won by like 80 points because he captained Zlatan. Not joking. So yeah, I mean that worked out. I had Rooney, get me 11 points with his goal and a bunch of bonus points. Robles, Annan, even Godoy from Vancouver, just kind of showing the DGW getting 5 points in a week where there weren't a whole lot of clean sheets. That worked out pretty well.
So we're going to have to start this right now. Everybody listening, you need to tweet this out and let me know what you think as well. I know all of us are familiar with the league, most likely, the show with Fantasy NFL. We need, and they have just, and we know what the wooden spoon is. From now on, I say that we call the lowest scoring last place player in fantasy is the Wiebe. And we need to have a Wiebe trophy, and we need to do something. I'm going to try to get something worked out to send it to him or whoever gets last place, but we need to make that a thing. So send out the Wiebe. Let's get this going. Let's get him to talk about it on the fantasy podcast, the video cast that they're doing with extra time and everything. So last place, that's called the Wiebe. That's just what it has to be. So let me know what you think. Any other ideas? But let's do this. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we could put like a inscription on a bottle of hairspray or something and make that
a bottle of hairspray. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it all out. I also had a pretty good week. This time I got 118 overall. Actually went up 2.4 million in my value. I can check my value actually right now. I didn't actually do that. So I've gone up to 224.9. Which is pretty good. I've still been able to fit everybody I wanted. Ashley, going back to your point, talked about just your husband making some crazy picks. A couple weeks ago, we saw the best 11 MLS team falling within roster rules. I must say, by the way, was not even 100, wasn't even 90 million as far as the cost for all the players. So sometimes going out on a crazy limb, it works. And I know we call them a differential, and sometimes people try to challenge me because, like I said, if I'm not wrong, it's just a challenge. You can't call me out. If you call me out, then I'm wrong. But just challenge me. I forgot that a few weeks ago, but that's what it was. But going out on the limb, sometimes we call them differentials, and we've been challenged sometimes saying, why in the world would you take a differential? It doesn't make any sense. Well, sometimes that's why you're doing this. You look at the field. Like this week, if you thought, hey, I think Russell's gonna go off this week. He's due for one. Maybe that's what it is. I think that's the worst fantasy logic you can use. But if you're just looking at the field and you're thinking, you know what, I really like this matchup. I think that this guy's going to go off. No one's been talking about him. So I think I'm going to go with Russell over the Sounders. Something might happen. Then that makes sense. That's a pick that can pay off. We call them differentials. It's not just picking a guy that may not ever score at all. So anything like that. So that's totally happened. So I definitely respect those types of picks. And to your husband as well, kudos. But I didn't go that way. I actually captained Vela, hedging my bets, kind of going with the safe pick there, trying to not lose points. So I went with the Vela captain. Did bring in Godoy, had Anon there on the bench. I did a Robles keeperoo that I stayed with Robles. I was at the Cincinnati game, so I got to see Cincinnati do valiantly against New York Red Bulls. It had some rotation, but did bring it together in the second half. Big fail for me. I did go with Abear, but he was on my bench, which is exactly where he should have been. But I also had Segura on my bench in my starting lineup that I brought in for some LAFC representation. Thought they could get a clean sheet against Montreal. They didn't, and unfortunately, he got an own goal. So
had the same one.
that happened as well. The 3 points, but 118 I feel was a pretty good score. I've climbed back up. Had a rough start to this season that I haven't been able to dig out. So not the kind of rankings overall that I want to be. Still in the top 600, which I'm not happy with. But it was
greedy.
Pardon?
Aren't we greedy?
Well, yeah.
Well, I moved into the top 1,000, so obviously I'm the best.
Yeah.
Boom.
No, I mean, it happens. And we'll talk a little bit later in the show about what to expect with the season switchover. But if you scored, I think, in the triple digits, you definitely did where you need to be. I've seen a lot of people who got maybe in the 120s is a fantastic week. 130s even better. But I think if you scored anywhere between the low to mid 100s, then you probably had a good round. Probably saw some up with your some green arrows right there, if green arrows were still a thing. Let's move on now to our head-to-head recap. Mike, you stomped Weeby, as you already alluded to, 116-38. Well done. Well done. There's your token points. Now, he's been doing better this season. He's been doing better, but I guess I can respect some Gold Cup. But, man, Weeby, come on. At least get an intern. Get an intern. Come on. Or Bobby. Bobby needs something to spice it up. But if you were saying that, Mike, he's getting bored. What?
Yeah. Bobby Warshaw tweeted out that Carlos Vela made fantasy boring.
Well, so did well, okay, guys, you send me the ideas. What can we do to help Bobby have more fun in fantasy? I got an idea, and it's going to be I'm going to invite Bobby to join me in taking the 100 million challenge next half of the season, where you can only spend 100 million each week on your players. So I'm going to challenge you right now, Bobby, to take the 100 million challenge and see then how exciting fantasy can be. So moving on, Blaine is not with us, but he narrowly lost his head-to-head with Matt Doyle, 100-108. Doyle and I think it might have been. I think Doyle and Bobby were the only two people who won this week, and I think from MLS, and I think Bobby's game was even closer. I beat Steve McPherson over from the Loons over there in Minnesota, 118-111. This is, except for Weeby, a tight league right here. And then our top scorer this week goes to Kyle McElhenney with MLS Fantasy Boss behind the numbers team, 127 points. So not a lot of us are really close to that score. But Ryan Anderson is still leading the way on top with a record of 10-0-3, though I think some people are pretty close with a couple more rounds. That could change, but Ryan's got a pretty good lead right there. What about your head-to-heads, Ashley? How did they look?
My favorite head-to-head is a league that I plan with another couple and just my husband. So we play the same 3 people over and over again. But it's really fun when we play couple versus couple. And then the other woman in my league, her name's Andrea, and she just kills us all every year. But it not so much that it's unattainable to beat her, but she does it slowly and subtly to where you think you have a chance, and then she just dominates you. And she happens to always play me the week I'm on this podcast. So it's kind of, she says she won't look, but I know she probably does. But I beat her husband, which is really fun. I actually really like when she and I play husbands because we always talk and they don't talk to each other about it, but she and I do. So I beat her husband and she beat my husband, but actually my husband is the only one to beat her this year, except I beat her once. So, and then I won my Sounders head-to-head. Week 2 is less dramatic.
I don't know. Mike, you may have to weigh in on that. I think that's called collusion.
It is. Yeah.
Owns up to it.
Absolutely what it is.
Well, I also want to mention the Patreon head-to-head league that we're doing this year. It's been so much fun. If anybody is interested in joining the Patreon head-to-head league, you just got to become a patron. It's been so much fun. But River Schoolkill has been taking it away so far. He's 10-1-2, still on top, but that could go away. Mark Prinsmetal is right behind him. He's 9-1-2, I believe. So another win there could get things switched around. So it's still pretty tight in the Patreon league. It's really, really fun. We're going to be having a fun time handing out prizes for that as well. So thanks to everyone who's been participating this year. And I think I won both of my head-to-head, so thumbs up. Good try. All right, let's get into a little bit more about our takeaways from round 13 before we move on. So let me know, what are your biggest surprising moments, Mike, from this round 13 that you want to talk about?
To me, the biggest surprise was Johnny Russell getting a hat trick. I guess I'll let Ashley talk about what happened there if she wants to.
I mean, it looks like a lot of lack of defense communication, but also if you watch that game, Johnny Russell hit his stride. Like, I can't take anything away from him. He looked fantastic. I didn't think Spordine as a team did, but he certainly did. The Sounders are just going, the Kim Kihei going out, putting in DP, just kind of a tough transition. And I think, as an ode to my boy back here, losing Chad Marshall's communication is huge. And even though he hasn't played the last few games, I think that's something you're going to start to see with that Sounders back line. They just don't communicate very well, Roman and Kim Kihei. Maybe Roman and Orega will do better if Kim is actually out, but Roman is also losing a couple steps. So, but I mean, every one of those Johnny Russell goals were beautiful. They were heartbreaking, but beautiful. But for me, one of the biggest surprises coming out of the week was Brian White, who's someone that I haven't given a lot of credit to, and then Saucedo for RSL.
Yeah, I had Saucedo on my list as well as one of the surprises. Let's see. Actually, he's one. No, I had a different RSL player, so continue.
Oh, okay. Well, what did he go up to? He just went up to 5.3, but he was 4.8 going into last week. And he's just a sneaky little midi that's producing really well statistically the last couple of weeks. I almost had him as a bench player, thought better of it. I'll definitely get ahead of ourselves. I'll definitely have him this week as a bench player because he's so cheap and he's producing goals and assists in, I think, the last 3 or 4 games. But he's just a guy I've never heard of and didn't seem like a big part of the team until maybe the last 4 or 5 games. And then, I don't really know. LA winning on the road without Zlatan, that was a big takeaway for me for the weekend. I know it was just a Jonah Dos Santos stunner goal, but they looked better than Orlando through most of the game, which was surprising to me from a fantasy perspective and an MLS perspective.
Well, that leads to one of my big surprises. Is that's 2 misses for PKs for Nani. So one miss back-to-back, last 2 games he's missed a PK. That's a shocker from a player that I think was many players this week, many fantasy players this week looked at Nani as one of their top 3 transfers for who they wanted on their team, especially with LA missing something on the road. And such a heartbreaker, not something you can really count on a lot. So I don't know how much weight you put that on.
Well, Nani's 1 of 3 of the whole year.
And those to say, maybe you don't count on him missing those, but finding players who are involved in set plays can be key to you making your fantasy decisions. It's been a big reason early on while I was going with Atuesta, with Lee Win out and his continued success as well. So that's something that has to weigh in your thinking early on. But also, I want to mention, going back to Russell, I think you tweeted this out, Mike. I saw this someplace on Twitter where they were like, that's the problem with Russell when it comes to fantasy, is he's either nothing or gets a hat trick.
Yeah, I think I posted that. I think he's got two hat tricks, or I don't. But he's definitely one of those feast or famine players where if he's in a good mood and a good game, and actually kind of talked about the defensive issues Seattle are having with losing Chad Marshall, and then the injury to Kihei mid game. I mean, he just took advantage of it, and he was on a roll and feeling it. But there's other games where you're like, oh, Johnny Russell was on the pitch.
Yeah.
He's just one of those types of players, and we have them all in fantasy. Albert Elise is one of those kinds of players. It's just like there's a lot of talent there. You expect it, but it doesn't, and it's not something that you can predict by opponent either. It's not like, oh, they do really well against bad opponents, and sometimes they do really well against good opponents. Sometimes they do really poorly against bad opponents. It's just you don't know what they eat for breakfast that day. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But one of my big players to kind of take a look at this week that we haven't talked about yet is Chris Wondolowski. I mean, the past 2 weeks, you could have said always Captain Wando.
I know.
I mean, another two goals, gets another start
on the road too. I mean,
on the road,
great, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Almeida's been doing in San Jose seems to be throwing teams for a loop still. I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. But San Jose plays into one of the double game week teams, and it'll be interesting to see if Wando can keep this up. Another player who we haven't talked about a whole lot on the podcast, I don't know if Ashley is going to want me to talk about.
I was going to say exactly who you're going to say.
Brian Fernandez of Portland. The double game week is probably going to prevent us from picking him, but I mean, Portland starts their homestand this week. So Diego Valeri and Brian Fernandez are probably going to start moving into must-owns for the second half of the season. And Brian Fernandez looks like he's having a lot of fun, looks like he's scoring goals with ease, and he's been doing it against some pretty decent opponents, going to Philly and getting a great goal. So definitely someone to look at.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to echo all of that, and I wanted to talk about Wando tonight because I had said Wando was someone who I was expecting people could be disappointed in or wasn't really sure. I thought he was a player to avoid this week. Even though he was cheap, might have been a really great off the bench. I just wasn't sure. And I'll own up to that. He got 2 goals. He's got 6 goals in 2 games, which is ridiculous. I still don't feel like that's going to be sustainable for him because they're all poaching goals. That's how Wando scores. That's who he is. And people are going to have to respect that again now when they see him start. I mean, like, all right, Wando's got the record. He's back in form. We're going to have to start making sure Wando's marked, have 2 people on Wando. So I don't think it's sustainable, but I mean, I will own up. Wando was a great bench switcheroo option for anybody this week. So glad to see him doing well. But you were right, Ashley. Toronto is not the team that they were last year, and they have had some concerns at home. I was still surprised that he was able to get 2 against Toronto like that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of this. So this weekend, San Jose goes to DC United, which for the better part of the beginning of the season was the best defense in the league, and then they go back home. I think it depends on the type of defense, and it's not to say that Toronto defense is bad. I would never go that far, but when you get defenses like Seattle, honestly, that aren't communicating very well and don't have all their key players, that is ideal for a guy like Wando. So I was happy to see him capitalize. I don't know if you guys know this. Our dog's name is Wando.
No.
Got him going into the World Cup, which definitely came back to bite us. But my husband wanted to do Zlatan or Wando, and I'm glad we went Wando. But so we always just kind of secretly root for him unless he's up here. But it's nice to see him capitalize and get those records. But I mean, I think you have to at least consider him as a cheap bench option occasionally if he can keep this up.
For sure. No, definitely for sure. And you mentioned DC. One of my surprises was DC struggling against New England. Pretty much anybody struggling against New England is still a surprise for me, especially with Bruce Arena not really in there taking the reins just yet. But you kind of expect more. I mean, it was Star Wars night up there in New England, and I think that they did their best. I mean, Rooney got Alderaan for sure when he just got laid out.
I was going to say, were you more surprised by the game or by that aerial drop kick?
I just sort of everything. I mean, he totally got Alderaan, and but he came back and he got the PK. But you just. I don't know. I still just expect a little bit more from teams that are going against New England and with DC. I feel like that's especially important to take away going into this double game week. So that kind of bridges the section for me going into their fantasy takeaways. You guys already touched on a couple of them. I'm going to throw out Jefferson Savarino as another RSL player that I think people should keep an eye on. 2 goals in 2 games. He's $8.4 million, so a sub $9 million player, and they've got a double game this week. Now, he's not getting as consistent bonus points as someone like Rusnak, but that's a great value option right there if you're looking for some of those players, something to fill up your bench maybe with the double game week. I had Brian Fernandez on my list as well, and you nailed it, Mike. With the double game week, maybe not someone you're going to pick, but 3 goals in 2 games, only one of those did he go a full 90 minutes. That's got to be someone you look into and keep in your mind, put on a watch list, put a sticky note on your monitor, whatever you're doing when you're making your teams, because that's not somebody you're going to want to forget as they're starting this run. Home games for sure. The last 2 that I have, and you guys can jump in right after this. The first one is we saw Piatti again this week, but he didn't go full 90. So that's just something I think people need to be aware of, because I do believe that once he is 90 minutes fit again and playing with this team, that Montreal will have a different look to them, or some more bite to them. And then finally, tease it a little bit earlier on, up at FC Cincinnati. They dropped 2 to the Red Bulls, but they were late in the game. And I got to say, from being there in person, things are shaping up for them. I think Doyle talked about it some in his review this week, but they had a lot of great chances starting out with Audi early in the game. They had at least 4 great chances in the game, much more than the Red Bulls did at start. Now, there was some rotation. Let's acknowledge that. But everybody back there on defense was doing a great job in trying to reduce the chances that the Red Bulls have. So they did great. Got a little gassed, I think, near the end. They put in a great, at least 60-minute performance. So they're not a dumpster fire. You can probably still bet against Cincinnati in most times, but like Ashley's husband, going with the Cincinnati as a flyer, as a switcheroo option, I don't think it's horrible, because things are looking a little better with them. But I mean, you're not going to be like captaining Audi anytime soon.
Right. Well, and it's important to keep in mind, because, I mean, we're coming to the end of the spring season, so we're about to get the budget reversion, and all of a sudden we're going to need cheap players, and cheap players are generally going to be the players who were terrible the first half of the season.
Sure.
So, flyers for switcheroos on cheap Cincinnati players is probably something you're going to have to think about at the end of the month.
Yep. Anything else, fantasy takeaways you guys want to mention before we start talking about all the housekeeping?
Well, I'll say that the game that you saw, Reid, was the only win of any Eastern Conference team this past weekend. It's been a rough go for the Eastern Conference. I mean, when New York City's draw against Chicago is probably the second or third best result of the weekend for the Eastern Conference teams, it's pretty bad.
That didn't really even stick with me. Wow, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, because Orlando, a lot of Eastern teams losing to Western teams, so that might be something to think about. I don't know if it's just kind of a fluke of who's been playing the last few weeks, but this has been terrible for the East. I mean, New York City's was on a bye week, and I just had a draw, and I think moved up in the rankings, or at least stayed the same, even though a lot of teams around them played, at least 2 games. So really weird times in the East, and so I think that'll come into play in the second half of the season, because it's going to be very tight. I mean, pretty much everyone is in it in the East.
I do want to mention Vancouver before we move on, just a fantasy takeaway from there. They got 4 goals total this week, 2-2 to the Red Bulls, and then scored 2-1 down there in Dallas. There are some things going on in Vancouver. I think what we've talked about before with the Whitecaps just not being consistent. Some of this stuff is still spread around. I mean, you're looking at Anand as a defender. That's usually a good option. You're looking at Wang there in the midfield. That's usually who you're going to go with there. But I still don't see some consistency. But, I want to make sure that we give credit where credit's due. And Vancouver, you guys scored 4 goals this weekend, and that's something that fantasy managers should keep in mind, that there is some production there in Vancouver under the right circumstances. And who knows, maybe a big Cascadia match could bring the best out of them.
Well, we'll see. Against Tacoma Defiance when that game rolls around, but
hey, that's it's good for fantasy.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to our Patreon housekeeping section. You heard me mention it at the top of the show with the head-to-head. Patreon is a website that we have set up that allows people who listen to our show to become a part of it financially, to help us be able to keep going, to help us get prizes for swag, and just do cool little things that we're trying to do right here. Have access to our members-only head-to-head league for more prize-winning options right there. We give away MLS gift cards up to $50 in value, and this is all for everyone there. Still trying to get little extras working out. Live streams have not been doing well. YouTube is not cooperating with me for getting that going. If you know how, let me know, because I want to get these live hangouts going for everybody. But let me know what you have ideas for patrons that you want to work out, and I'm happy to do it. Happy to get more YouTube content. Let me know. Send me messages in the comments. We've got 100 subscribers now on YouTube, so thanks to all of you out there as well. It's a great community that we're building here. If you want to learn more about it, head over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/MLSFI. Had a quick question from someone on Reddit. I'll switch to it real quick so I can give a shout out where credit is due. This came from Jay Casimir, who said wanted us to talk about the switch between the seasons that's coming up, because he doesn't think a lot of folks get it. I've seen some responses being like, yeah, this is my first year. I didn't really know about this. So I'm going to mention it now. We'll talk about it a little bit later, I'm sure. There are only 2 weeks left in this first spring season of the fantasy game. This round 14 and round 15 are our last 2 seasons. So this is the penultimate round for that. And what that means is after round 15, we're going to have a first half of the season winner, and then everything's going to reset. We're going to be giving out prizes in the Patreon League and the Fantasy Boss League and the Reddit League. Everything's going to happen, but points are going to reset for everyone, so you're no longer going to have your point totals. The value of your team is going to reset back to 100 million. That's when I'm taking the challenge. And then also player prices are going to adjust. I didn't say reset on purpose here, because what's going to happen is some players will reset back to where they were at the beginning of the season. Usually it's the mediocre players or the players that got on for a few minutes, maybe lost some value, and then things have changed. That's going to reset back to where they were at the start of the season. Other players who have been consistent are going to stay at the higher values. They'll drop down some, but they're going to stay at those higher values. And then many of those players who were undervalued or overvalued at the beginning of the season will be adjusted closer to maybe what they should have been valued at the beginning of the year. Now, this second part is what frustrates a lot of people, because people really want those values. But that's just how it is. We now know more information, and players are going to be more accurately priced. So all of that's going to change for round 16. So keep that in mind when we get there and you start setting your teams, especially if you're someone who's switching over from one of the other leagues, Fantasy Bundesliga, Fantasy Premier League, anything like that. Things are going to switch up at round 16. So keep an eye on that. It might be a little hard, but we're going to be here with you to help you get some ideas and guide you along the way. So,
and probably worth noting that can also include position readjustments.
Yes.
I don't know there's a whole lot, but it might, for example, Odin from Vancouver, I think he's been playing more as a midfielder. It wouldn't shock me if Ben moved him up into be a mid spot. So there's not a whole lot of those that I know about this year, but it's not just prices. Ben does allow himself some leeway to change positions if need be.
So now let's get into the double game week. This is another massive double game week. Hope you all enjoyed the slight breather that we got last week with just New York and Vancouver. But this week we have Atlanta, Minnesota, Montreal, Real Salt Lake, Philadelphia Union, the Colorado Rapids, DC United, Chicago Fire, Sporting Kansas City, and LA Galaxy, all on a double game week. So those are players that you're going to want to make sure you've got set and locked by Wednesday, May 29th. 7 o'clock p.m. for that first game of Atlanta versus Minnesota. All in the double game week, we're right here. Atlanta has a double home game this week. Montreal has a double home game this week. Then we also have, I believe, DC United with a double home game this week. So those are some teams you may want to look to. Not going to have to travel at all. So that's always something to consider. Real Salt Lake is a double away game this week. And then we also have the Chicago Fire with a double away game this week. So keep that in mind for those players. Usually just history gives us an example that those teams don't always do as well, and people tend to lead more towards those double home teams. But just make sure that's thrown out there so everybody knows what's up. Nobody's on a bye. And then our good friend Andrew Carlard was asking us to shout out some switcheroo options with all of these transfers going on. And in my opinion, you're going to look at New England and LAFC for your potential switcheroo options, since you may not be loading up with the triple LAFC this week. New England has got 2 4.0 midfielders. They played the last game on Sunday this week, so that's excellent for any kind of a ruse that you want to have set up. And then over at LAFC, you got a 4.0 forward. You got 2 4.0 midfielders, 2 4.0 defenders, and 2 4.0 goalkeepers. So a lot of options right there. You might also look at Portland since they're not having a double game week, but any of those 3 teams right there are going to be who you're going to want to look toward for your switcheroo scrub players. That's all I have, unless you guys want to jump in. If not, Mike, I'm throwing it over to you for the injury news.
Okay, we've got a few injuries of this week. Tito Villalba missed the game against RSL. I'm not sure if he'll be able to make it back in time for the double game week, but obviously that's going to be a player that we're going to be looking into this week with the DGW. Kevin Molino was injured in a friendly, hurt his left hamstring. Haven't seen a timetable for him. For DC, Paul Arriola is going to got a 2-game additional suspension, or got, 1-game additional suspension after his red card, which means he misses the first game of the double game week. So he misses the game against Chicago. We talked about Matt Turner. He got a straight red after Alderaning Wayne Rooney. I don't know if he'll get any additional time for that. Adnan did leave the match early due to injury. It was sad because someone was tweeting me like, hey, he got a goal. Great. I hope he gets a clean sheet. And I was like, yeah, about that. Sorry, bud. Sad times. Michael Bradley actually missed a game, which is one of the first times I've ever had to say that. Had a sore hamstring. Jonathan Osorio also had to deal with discomfort in his hip and groin, and I think he missed the 18. We already mentioned it. Kim Keehee missed or had to be subbed out in the 40th minute for Seattle. And then we got some disco news. Ladero got a yellow card accumulation. And I can see that the San Jose are also going to miss Thompson and Espinoza next week. So that's going to be a big loss for them against DC United. And I would love to tell you other games, other players and yellow card accumulation, but the disco disciplinary summary hasn't been updated since May the 7th. So that's all I can do.
Hey, it happens. Thank you so much, Mike, for all that hard work that you put in. I know it helps a lot of people when they're thinking about their transfers, especially for double game weeks. You got to look at those yellow card accumulations.
Yeah, and I do think those San Jose absences might be important when we're talking about which offensive players to go, because we'll talk about it in a sec.
Of course. All right, well, let's move on to our ESPN Plus Round 14 preview. Hey, if you're not looking at ESPN Plus yet as a potential option for your streaming needs, you really should. $5 a month. They've got a lot of content out there. Not all of it's even available on ESPN. So get that extra content that you need when it's available in your area. Hicks, you know what I'm talking about. And just check out what they have to offer. It's super cheap. You can get a link to ESPN Plus over at MLSFantasyBoss.com in the sidebar near our Discord chat. Try it for free for 7 days, and then let me know what you think, because I've been enjoying it this year, and I want to know if you guys are finding it the same value that I am. So check it out, ESPN Plus. Let's get to round 14. 2 questions I like to start out with, like I have the last few weeks here. I want to know, Ashley, starting with you, which match do you think is going to be the best one to look forward to as far as potential fantasy points? And also, before we even talk about who your picks are there any players that you're just a hard pass on? Like, I don't even want them. I want nothing to do with them this week.
That is a great question. So for me, I think, and I hate to go early, and Mike kind of already touched on it. Either of the DC games for me are kind of hot, even with how they've been playing and the kind of disparity between the start of the season and their current form. Especially that DC San Jose game for me is like a must look to for fantasy. DC doesn't tend to heavily rotate because they've been kind of short on, depth for most of this season. I think it was their first double game week. They rotated out Briant and Birnbaum, which burned a lot of people. But like Bill Hamid, Wayne Rooney, those types of guys, when there's not any injuries that we know of, those for me are kind of must-haves for those games. And then I'm really teetering between a hard pass on Jonah Dos Santos. So I picked up hear me out. I picked up Jonah Dos Santos for most of the bigger LA games this year, and he hasn't really burned me except for the last double game week when he got hurt and maybe it wasn't a double game week, but he got hurt in a game.
No, it was.
It was, right?
I had it.
Yeah, right?
We all did.
And then he missed a game because of the injury, and then against Orlando, I mean, he scores a stunner and he produces so well with bonus points, but I don't know. I'm nervous that he won't go both because he'd had that injury recently. And I just, my brain says go to him, but my heart says I might have to hard pass on him.
Mike, what about you? Same questions.
All right. Philadelphia and Colorado. Colorado's been doing better. They got their second win. I don't think we talked about them beating Columbus. But it's kind of the same story that we've seen all year for Colorado. They give up a lot of goals, but they score a lot of goals. So, if you're looking for defensive points in that one, you're not going to get it. But offensive points, midfielders, forwards, I think there's a lot of opportunities in that game. Players to stay away from, Lucho Acosta for me. We remember him from last year. He's putting up 2s and 3s right now. I don't know what's going on, if it's, just not having Emil Assad out there. You would think even this past game against New England, against 10 men, without Arriola, you'd see more usage, more bonus points out of him, but that just didn't happen. So for me, he's kind of one of those first players you think about for DC United for so many years, but he's got to be a hard pass this week.
Yep.
Yeah, those are great points right there. Well, let's get into who you are considering this week for everybody. So let's start out with keepers, defenders, and shutouts. Mike.
All right. So for me, I'm going to look at the home teams, and I pretty much just crossed out Montreal right now, unless I know what Piaté status is. If you remember from a few years ago, Piaté coming made night and day difference, and we saw that again this week. LAFC probably could have had a lot more goals than the 4 they scored. So I don't trust Montreal at home, even though their schedule's pretty good. So I pretty much went heavy with Atlanta, DC in the back. I have Brad Guzan. I know he makes mistakes and has been kind of sloppy, but Minnesota has been putting up a lot of goals. Chicago's have issues. Gaetan's just back from injury, so I don't know how much he'll play, especially because it's on turf. So I think that's a good opportunity for some clean sheets. I have Miles Robinson for the same reason. He's a little bit cheaper, but I'm going 3 defensive in the back with Atlanta, LGP. Kind of hoping for some set beat magic. Then I have Brilliant and then Jara on the bench. I think San Jose is going to be missing a lot of pieces with Thompson and Espinoza. So I'm kind of hoping that they'll be able to body up on Wando and know where he is and kind of shut them down. So, I'm going heavy with the home teams in the GW this week.
Nice. I like those picks. Ashley, who are you looking at?
Basically the same as Mike, except I don't have this disdain for Montreal. I feel like Montreal could turn around and surprise us, which they do randomly. And I'm just hoping I'm guessing that random time. I went with Bill Hamid, mostly just because it was between Brad Guzan and a defender for Atlanta because of what the rest of my team looks like. And so I also went with LGP, who also just makes me nervous. I don't know where he sits on yellow cards. I need to double check that before I actually play him because I feel like he has to be close. But he's so good with bonus points, and he didn't get rotated the last round. And then I went with Steve Birnbaum, who's just someone that I like when DC's on a double like that. And then I'm actually starting Diallo for Montreal tentatively. And then Kai Wagner is my defender on the bench, but I am kind of toying between putting him in for Diallo. But as of right now, Wagner's on my bench. So
the nice thing about Birnbaum, I got to say. No, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say LGP has 3 yellow cards. I looked it up with the fantasy.
There you go.
That's it. But it's because Atlanta hasn't played as many games.
Yeah, you're right.
So he's safe. If you've got 3 yellows, there's absolutely no way you can miss that. Well, red card. But you can't get your yellow card accumulation in those games. That's not going to happen. So he's good. No, I like the Birnbaum pick because he's also that goal threat as well. That he gets some goals going on those set pieces. So very, very nice. You guys touch a lot of the ones that I had. if you do like Montreal and you, unlike Mike, that's some pretty hot picks right there, Mike. Right there with what you're going with the Montreal hate. But
can I argue against myself just to give?
I mean, you're welcome to. That's what we're all about, giving people options.
Yeah, I mean, because Blaine's not here, so I'll pretend that I'm Blaine, and to tell you what Lily's going to tell us. If I was picking for Montreal, it would be because RSL is terrible on the road.
Yep.
And with Orlando's kind of struggles offensively, if Nani doesn't have a good game, then I could see Montreal doing it. I mean, and like I say, if Piette starts, I'll put in a Montreal defender.
Piette starting, maybe we get I've Piatti back. I just it went out. Maybe we get Piatti back for the full 90. Maybe that's why he's not been getting those full 90s now, to save him for these 2 home games. No travel. It could be something for the home crowd, but no, I get it. I get it.
Full 90 in either game. I just imagine they just kind of play him a few games until the Gold Cup, break, and then just
entirely possible. But I mean, if we're looking at like 70, 80 minute Piatti, that's still pretty good as well too.
Also,
they're at home.
The squad that Orlando traveled with for their last double game week to Seattle, it was a completely different starting 11. I'll take a Montreal defender over Orlando players that have never even played a minute.
For sure.
But Orlando isn't on the DGW this week
Yeah, but they're going to Montreal, right? Was my point? Am I wrong?
They're traveling Saturday. Yeah, 5 o'clock.
Last time they traveled, they completely. I mean, they've been rotating a little bit on their away games, anyways. But you're right; it's not a double for Orlando, so maybe they won't.
But if you're looking for some budget with a Montreal pick, I think you got to look at Lovitz. He's right there with Diallo, $7 million. It's pretty easy to go through there. If you're looking for a Philadelphia player, because I think they've got one of the better home and away rotations this week. Colorado, like Mike said, they have been able to score. They've got Kamara, who's been doing some great stuff, and they've got the forward who tends to come in and score, whose name I can't pronounce. Which should not be a surprise to anyone who listens to the show. Yes.
Yeah.
But they've got some offensive threats like their Shinyashiki. Yeah, there we go. I knew you all want to hear me try to say it. So they do have some pieces there, and they've gotten a little bit better defense, so that might help them get that offensive pressure. But Philly been doing pretty well this week. I know they've been called a darling this year. So Gaddis, I think, is a good shot right there. They're going, they're not hosting. They're going to Minnesota as their second game, and we did talk earlier how they've been struggling with the offensive production. People were asking about Quintero last week, and I said he's just not doing it, and he didn't do it. So there are some concerns there with Minnesota on the offensive side. So this could be a decent week for Philadelphia defenders as well, if you're looking for some options there. If you're looking for a switcheroo option or a keeperoo option right here, I know I had a question. Andrew Crawlard again was wanting to know about some of that. I think if you're going to go with Guzan as your starting keeper, and I think that's a great pick. That's who I have right now. Again, Minnesota for the same reasons, and Chicago's been struggling a little bit, but a little better than Minnesota. Then if you're looking at Guzan going as your keeper, he wraps up around 8 o'clock on Saturday, which gives you plenty of time to look at some other people. And I like Bill Hamid. Sorry, not Bill Hamid. I was looking at DC. I like Tim Howard. I like Tim Howard there with that second Colorado game back at home against FC Cincinnati. So
single game week keeper option.
Sure. And I guess I actually can't do that with Bill Hamid since he is a double game week keeper. So it's Bill Hamid. I did it again. Tim Howard. I totally overlooked that. So give me your single game week keeper since I mean.
It pains me to say it, but I was talking to my husband about it, is Jesse Gonzalez for FC Dallas. Seattle's on the road. They're missing so many key pieces going into this weekend, and then even more the following weekend, and it hurts me to go against them. But if whoever your bench keeper is doesn't do it, and you get through the Wednesday games and you need a single game week, Jesse Gonzalez just jumps off the page to me.
Yes. That is the right option. I totally got my notes mixed up here, and Tim Howard is my alternate keeper for the double game week keeper. So thank you for getting us back on track there.
I didn't even mean to.
No, you did it. I mean, it's like I said, it was a trek to get back from the long weekend this week, and so my notes are a little confusing. But I'll edit that out. I won't edit that out.
No, we don't edit that kind of stuff.
We don't edit that out. But no, you're right. Dallas against Seattle with some of their struggles. That is the best of the keeperoo options there. With Atlanta likely with it ending around 8, you'll get to see the Brad Guzan pick as well. And then as the alternate for Brad Guzan, there we go. You're looking at maybe going with Tim Howard, I think, as they may drop some to Philadelphia, but they're going against Cincinnati at home, traveling up there to Colorado. Pretty good shot, I think, at a clean sheet for them. If you
first trip to altitude,
I believe it is. It's the first trip to Colorado, so good times right there. And if you're going to go with Tim Howard, you're not really going to have a keeperoo option at all, because that game's going to end around 10:30, which is when, I mean, you could try to go with Portland if you want to go with that, but I don't know LAFC on the road, so I think Guzan's your best shot if you want to have a keeperoo this week.
Yep.
Well, let's move on to midfielders. I'm going to start out with a question that I really liked that came from Twitter from Maureen Haynes 17, who just made a comment, and I want to get you all to weigh in on this. I'm starting to wonder if fatigue is setting in, especially for the midfielders. It seems like a large percentage of them are underperforming for their price tag. Do you see that as well, or do you think this is just, hey, we're seeing some rotations, Gold Cup, call-ups, any kind of thing?
No, I think that's probably right. I mean, part of it is because Vela's star has shown so brightly this year. But I mean, think about the midfielders who we would have expected and came in with high price points. Kaku hasn't done well. Pity Martinez, Ladero hasn't been as consistently good as he once was. I mean, like, you know, I'm about to say that I'm picking Jonathan Dos Santos. That's because he's one of the more consistent midfielders this year, and that's absolutely crazy to say. I mean, for me, it's been really expensive forwards, and then you're just trying to get cheap midfielders just to kind of make ends meet, because there's not a whole lot of them that stand above the rest. Ashley, is that what you find?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of injuries too. If you look at some of the teams that you expect to perform well, like DC, Atlanta, Seattle, Portland, some of those biggest name midfielders that came in with such a high price point, either people around them or they themselves have gotten injured. So they're not falling the way you'd like them to. You know, that's always fun. I remember at one point last year, Josef dropped down to like 8 or something. And you could just snag them right up. But they're not dropping. I guess for me, it's less of how expensive they are. It's that people that aren't performing don't seem to be going down as much, because either they went off in the beginning or whatever. But it's also just the teams you tend to look to based on last season or just their hype. I think the midfielders aren't consistent, and you're seeing guys like Jonah Dos Santos or Osvaldo Alonso pick up 5, 6, 7 point weeks consistently without goals or assists. But the goals and assist guys just aren't coming through as consistently. So maybe it's fatigue. To me, it seems like a lot more injury, which I guess goes hand in hand.
And we've seen so many double game weeks tends to benefit defenders as well. So it may not necessarily be fatigue. It's just that the points have been falling differently because of the way the schedule is. But I love the question. Thanks everybody for weighing in on that. This is something very important to consider with all these double game weeks and the upcoming buys. Mike, midfielders, what are you thinking?
All right. I'm going to go with Jonathan Dos Santos. I didn't mention in the injury rundown, but Matt Beasler left for Sporting Kansas City towards the tail end of the Seattle game. That means they're just as shorthanded as they've been. They don't really have the depth to make up for that. They get Zlatan back, so I think there's a great opportunity. And then they're home against the New England Revolution. I know the Revs have been able to kind of, slog it out at home, and I'm sure they'll slog it out. But just sitting in the back and absorbing crosses, well, that's been what LA's been doing all year. So I think LA will be okay with those two games. I don't think either of those teams have the defensive personnel to really stop Zlatan, who's been gotten a 2-week break. I mentioned earlier about Philly. I have Montero, 8.5. He's still been pretty good. And then I have Majudinen on the bench. And then I have Ili Sanchez from Sporting Kansas City on the bench. I know I just trash all over Sporting Kansas City, but Ili Sanchez has been a pretty consistent defensive midfielder again. He wasn't last year, but he's kind of getting back to where he was 2 years ago. And at $8 million, he's probably an easy guy for me to spend the money and put on the bench kind of to see what happens. So to the question you just asked, yes, that means I only have 2 midfielders and a switcheroo mid in my lineup. I have 3 forwards this week, which is very rare for me.
For sure. Ashley.
Well, and Ilya is going to play because they don't have anyone else, right? He's definitely going to go both. I'm flirting between Jonathan Dos Santos, which I told you is someone that it seems like I should stay away from him, but he does produce, and Johnny Russell. So I'm going back and forth between the 2 of them, just because historically when Russell gets hot, he stays hot for a short amount of time. He doesn't often go off and then just die down the next game. So I'm considering riding that wave, but like Mike said, Sporting's just kind of piecing it together. Zlatan's about to come into the cauldron, so we'll see which one of them I go with. And then I like Gressel this week. I like Atlanta at home. They're kind of unpredictable, which is something I never thought I'd say about them.
Coming down with something over you 2 coughing. Jeez.
I know. Getting over something. But I do like Gressel. He's someone that I had before he got expensive a couple seasons ago. So I think that's more of an emotional choice than a realistic one. And then I like Osvaldo Alon. He's on my bench. But I like him just for all the bonus points he gets. And then I talked about this earlier in the beginning, but I'm also putting Salcedo on my bench with RSL. Gosh, even though that they have 2 road games, they're 2 road games that I think could pan out for them. They are going to Montreal, could go either way. They're going to Red Bull, could go either way. Neither of those games to me scream unwinnable. They're not great on the road, but that's why he's on my bench, and he's only 5.3. He was 4.8 last week. So, and he has, I think he has 2 goals in 3 games. Maybe even more than that. Yeah, he's coming off a 7, 15, and 11. So he's got 2 goals in the last 3 games and 2 assists as well. So for me, he's just a good differential. When I don't want to spend a ton of money on a bench player, that's something that's always hard for me, is to put someone like Johnny Russell or Dos Santos on my bench. It just pains me. It's like throwing away money. So Salcedo is one that I'm considering. If he hits, he hits. And if he doesn't, I didn't waste any money.
Very good. I've got several of the ones you guys have mentioned. I'm actually going with currently Jonathan Dos Santos. I wanted to say that right this week since I butchered it the last 2 weeks, confusing him for his brother. But JDS and Russell, because I agree, Russell tends to have some hot points. I think two bites at the apple this week against LA and then away to Houston. I think he's got some chances for some points. I like Jonathan Dos Santos. I definitely disagree with maybe some of the hesitation, Ashley. We haven't had Alessandrini this year. We haven't really seen a lot of stuff from Leggett coming out this year like we've seen in the past. And Jonathan Dos Santos has really been picking up that slack there. He's getting some of the defensive production there, and he's getting some of the offensive go-to connecting sometimes with Zlatan. So I think Jonathan Dos Santos has been a great option for points this year. 10.7 is not that expensive, I think, for a good, solid double game week option. Mike, like you, I like Monteiro there at Philadelphia. He's just been great, and at 8.5 is a fantastic value. I have right now on my bench just a placeholder because I want to see just how this works before games start, because there'll be time. There'll be time to see this lineup. I've got Piatti on my bench right now.
Ooh.
And I know it's I don't know if you're oohing at me or if there's something going on there with your dog, but
nope.
Okay. I've got Piatti on the bench. Like I said, he can really turn this team around with his production. He's been getting more minutes. 2 home games, I think, could be a great time to bring him back in. But I want to see that first lineup against Real Salt Lake. So Piatti is a placeholder for me right there. If you're looking for other options right now, I think you can look at Chicago. They've been getting some goals. It's not all turned around for them, but they've been getting some production there. I think you're going to look for either Frankowski, who's 8.4, or you're going to go to Katai, who's 10.2. Frankowski was doing it well last week. Overall, though, it's Katai who's leading the way. You could go with someone more defensive there with Dax McCarty, but they're all kind of hitting around those same points right there. I love the Alonso shout out right there. I think he's always a good call to go with for a double game week as well.
No way.
I like all that. And I mentioned that earlier on, in addition to Saucedo that you were talking about, that pardon?
Savarino, right?
No, yeah, you mentioned Saucedo. I was talking about Savarino earlier on the show, so that could be another option you look at RSL. If you don't want to go with a Rusnak, I would hesitate though, because he tends to not be that great on the road. So we'll see. I don't know if it's a great shot, but those cheaper RSL players I think could be really good options, as well as just throwing that stuff out there. I think we've covered a lot of good players. Let's move on to forwards. Ashley.
I am picking up Josef this weekend. I just like them at home. He's kind of been hit or miss, but he's been hitting as of late, so I'll ride that wagon. I'm also definitely picking up Zlatan. I like to see what he's like with rest. I feel like he's been injured this amount of time, but not suspended. This is his first big suspension in MLS, so I'm interested to see when he's rested. And, you know, he tends to just get very hungry. So I think that he's kind of a must-have. And then I'm also going with Wayne Rooney, which, again, it sounds weird to say, feels like a gamble. But if anyone's going to score on a team that's not scoring a lot, it's Wayne Rooney. So, you know, he's going to take their PKs. He's going to take their free kicks. And so DC kind of makes me nervous because they're not producing a lot of points. Like I think you talked about, it's hard to watch them go to New England and struggle. That just doesn't make sense. But they have 2 home games against moderate teams, I would expect. So I'm plugging him in. But I also toyed with, and I don't know if Mike will love or hate this, Jonathan Lewis for Colorado. They have him listed as a forward, and he's very inexpensive. I don't know that I'd feel comfortable starting him because I'm not sure he'll go both. He did score over the weekend, and he looked good in that system. So if you want, again, I'm not doing it, but I thought about it. So if you need to save money for some of these more expensive midfielders or the expensive forwards, I think Jonathan Lewis might be a sneaky little bench pick. Kai Kamara is the one that jumps out at you. But the last couple games I've watched, he hasn't been the predominant attacking player. So it's hard to pick amongst those other guys, but Jonathan Lewis seems to really be fitting into that system right away. So I consider it as a bench guy.
Mike.
Yeah, she stole one of my sneaky picks.
Oh.
I was gonna say Jonathan Lewis. I mean, 4.4. How could you go wrong? Yeah, I mean, he scored, and I think they'll put up a lot of goals this week. I have the same picks, except for one. I have Zlatan. I have Wayne Rooney. On Rooney, for me, I picked him over Josef Martinez. Only because of the suspensions that San Jose are going to have to deal with. Yeah. And I feel like San Jose's system is a system that they don't have a lot of depth, and having to replace players is going to be a little bit more difficult for them. So I think I see Wayne Rooney having a little bit more opportunity than Josef Martinez playing against, decently full-strength teams from Minnesota and Chicago. But then I do have Kai Kamara. But again, I haven't been watching a whole lot of Colorado, so if Ashley's saying she's been watching and Kai Kamara hasn't been, that makes me nervous. But Kai Kamara's been putting up what I liked about him is that he's been putting up bonus points, even though he doesn't necessarily get goals. So he's still like a 4 or 5 point producer, and he's less than 9 million. So there's not a whole lot of strikers you could find less than 9 million who are getting bonus points when they're not scoring goals. So. But now, Ashley's made me question everything I know. I don't like it.
Move that money around. I don't know. Don't do that.
You guys had great picks as well. I like the Lewis shout out there. I think Kai Kamara is someone that people usually go to. He's been getting some good shot production. I think that's important to remember that Kai Kamara is one who will take shots, and so that can turn out to his advantage as well. Like I said, Philly's not awful. That's some good travel for them, but they're gonna have Cincinnati, and I think that's the wild card there. That could be an opportunity for a big man who can body up with those big defenders that Cincinnati has. Might give them some more trouble than what they've been seeing from some other teams. So, but some great options there as far as the budget goes. Both of those guys are really low priced. The first 3 players I brought in were Zlatan, Rooney, and J-Mart. I've changed some things up since then just because I went pretty heavy with my midfielders as well, as far as money goes. Another name I'll throw out there that we haven't mentioned, and I think he's going to be available. Mike, double check me on this with the cards, but isn't Nemeth coming back this week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to have Nemeth back. He didn't play before because he was on his suspension. So Nemeth back with Russell in form, going up against LA Galaxy at home, and then they're going to go on the road to Houston, which is usually a big game for Sporting Kansas City against Houston right there. Could be a pretty good shot for him. 7.8 million could really help him fit into a lot of teams if you're still struggling with your budget, or you just want to splurge at this time of the year and get all the big name players. So definitely some good options there. But I like Joseph, Rooney, and Zlatan. I think you guys already covered the big important reasons, especially set plays with Rooney that we mentioned at the top of the show. So I like that. I like that little coverage that we have there. So thank you very much. Now the big question, who are you going to captain? Ashley.
So I've been going back and forth between 2. I've been playing it pretty safe with my captains because always Vela, right? And on the weeks where it's not him, I feel like it's kind of hit or miss. But I'm going back and forth between Wayne Rooney and Bill Hamid. I haven't captained or goalkeeper yet this season. I'm considering Birnbaum instead of Bill Hamid, but I'm considering captaining someone representing the defensive backline of DC United. Just because I feel like that's a safe-ish pick. I like them on the double, but like I said, that's not something I normally do, so I'm hesitating, but it's creeping up in the back of my mind. But otherwise than that, I'm feeling Rooney over the Lion, over Joseph. I think he's one of the better offensive captain choices.
Okay, yeah. Mike, who are you looking at?
Well, I don't have Vela on my team, so I just got rid of my team and put Vela on there and captain Vela. No. For me, it was between Rooney and Zlatan. I don't feel good enough about any of the clean sheet shots this week to go with a defensive captain. But I mean, it worked out okay for me last week, but I only got 1 clean sheet. But right now I have it on Rooney. That could change easily. He's just been a pretty good set piece taker. And I feel like he has a lower floor than Zlatan. So that's why I'm going him over Zlatan.
Okay, good choices. I like that. I have gone with Zlatan for myself. We mentioned some of the reasons as well. He's back from suspension. I assume that's going to light a fire under him, which is already constantly burning, wanting to really show what he can do. You mentioned that Sporting Kansas City is going to be without Beasler likely. So again, some hits there. Could be a weaker home defense that LA Galaxy can take advantage of. Jonathan Dos Santos available, staying healthy, can help with that as well. So I like Zlatan there. And then if they can keep that form going, maybe they can crack this New England egg that we're still wondering. But do we think that we're going to see Bruce Arena come back to start coaching at New England for the LA game?
I didn't think about that.
I hope so. Just
like what's that going to be? Is that going to be he's here, we've got to stick it to him, or it's going to be like, oh, I'm going to show them? Like, is that what we're building up for? The Bruce Arena debut,
right? You can't. Well, I'm not a LA fan, so I guess I don't know. But it's not like he left them for another MLS team or they fired him, you know. But he also didn't take us to a World Cup, so maybe I don't know. That's
is he in their head? Is he in their head?
They didn't knocking at his door, I don't think, whenever they were looking for a coach. So I'm thinking he's coming in there with a big old bottle of champagne, just like pouring drinks and watching the points drip away from the Galaxy. You know, he's gonna go full heel.
Yeah,
but I love it. But I've got it on Zlatan right now. I like his shot to see what happens. But Rooney's and also definitely, I think, a number 2 captain right there, or those 2 guys are 1 and 2 as great options. With some of the questions that are still surrounding this round. Let us know who you think. Who are you going to captain? Who are you going to put into your team that we haven't mentioned? Let us know. Ask me why we didn't talk about somebody. That's been a video segment I've wanted to try to put together for the past few weeks because we do get those questions that, like last week, why did you talk about Quintero? I didn't like him. But send us those questions to us. Why did we not talk about someone? Who did we miss?
Hate your team.
And that's right. And I'll try to maybe, if I get enough, maybe do a quick video tomorrow to try to drop that down for just follow-ups or what did we miss. So I'd love to do a segment like that if I can get content. So please send in questions, send in thoughts and comments like that, and we can try to provide more content to everybody out there. That's all that I have for the show tonight. Anything else that you guys want to add before we get to our plugs?
Nope.
Shaking of heads for those of you in YouTube land. All right. Well, then let's do this. Ashley.
MLSfemale.com. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. We have reporters for almost every major team in Major League Soccer. And we have a lot of really talented women putting out great articles from their perspective as MLS fans. So follow us on Twitter. They do a great job, the social media team, of live tweeting the games and all that stuff. So if you can't pay attention to the games and you're trying to look it up on Twitter, they do a great job of that. So if you haven't, check them out.
Mike.
Just follow me at Mike.Tiger. Use the hashtag MLS injury news if you see an injury.
And of course, you can check out everything I do over at MLSFantasyBoss.com. We have the charts and the summaries and the podcast over there to view. You can also head over to r/FantasyMLS, the subreddit over there at Reddit, with some great conversation, and post any articles or tips that you find. Rate my teams. We have the Discord chat at MLSFantasyBoss.com with some fantastic fantasy minds there. Someone from MLS every now and then if you need to vent or throw out some ideas. And be on the lookout at Reddit. I'm going to be posting a link soon for collecting questions. We're going to have a mid-season feedback survey. So I want to know what kinds of questions you all have that you want to get answers to for how to collect feedback for the game, what you like, what you don't like, improvements. Just look for it. I want to know what kinds of questions you want answered. And then, of course, you can also check me out in my weekly MLS newsletter that you can subscribe to over at MLSsoccer.com. Just search for newsletters in the Google. And you can catch me on SiriusXM talking with Jason Davis when we don't have massive double game weeks. So not this week, but coming up. So that's all for the show tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and good luck.